Arham, 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 Jai Jirinda, everyone. Om Aram. Welcome to today's talk on Aparigraha. So I'll just start sharing my screen. So Aparigraha. So before we start, let's just recite the Nokar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Uvajjayanam. Om Namo Loe Sappasahunam. Eso Panchanamokaro. Sabba Pavapanasano. Mangalanam cha sabbesim paramam havai mangalam. So we're going to today's talk is on Aparigraha. So before we start, let me just actually ask the audience that can you think of words in Hindi or Gujarati which actually begin with Pari, P-A-R-I, Pari. So if you can just use the chat function and just write any words which you can think of which begins with the word Pari. Just one second. I'm not sure if the chat enable function is. Yeah, Parivar, Parinamic, Pariksha, very good. Any more? Paristiti, excellent. Parichay. Pari itself is a word, fairy. That's, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think there could be many meanings to the word Pari. Parivartan, Parima. Excellent. I think you've got quite a comprehensive list here, and I'm sure there'll be many more. So if I look at the words which I came up with, so the ones like Paristiti, Parivar, Parikram, Pariksha, Parinam, Paripalan, Paribhasa, and Paribhraman. And there could be many more. But one thing common amongst all these words is Paristiti means situations from considering all events. Parivar means all relations. Parikraman means to circle something or someone. Pariksha. So what does Pariksha mean? Pariksha means after you have studied, to examine all the content which you have studied. Parinam. Parinam is the situation or the result after all the events have occurred. Paripalan is result after all the factors are taken into account. Paribhasa means definition or explanation of a term. So there could be many interpretations, then you're taking all of them together, and that's Paribhasa. And Paribrahman means to rotate or revolve. So the reason to consider this is Parigraha. Aparigraha actually is the negation of Parigraha. So what does Parigraha mean then? So this begs the question. It also begins with the word Pari. So Pari essentially means round, abundant, rich, fullness, or from all sides. And then Graha means to take hold of, to accept, or to receive, or to possess something. So as you can see, what Parigraha implies is that you actually want to accumulate things from all sides. And that is almost depicted by when people have this Black Friday sale. You can see that there's a great commotion. People just want to go helter-skelter and grab whatever items they can get. So we are now staying in a society, in a culture that we just want to accumulate and accumulate more and more things. I mean, take the example of Imelda Marcos, who was the former First Lady of the Philippines. She was known to have a whole wardrobe or thousands of shoes. So she had a passion for shoes. And I'm sure it's all very common for all of us that either our attics or our garages have got so much clutter. We've accumulated things over so many years and they just pile up and pile up. So Parigraha essentially means possessions. And that's what is the general meaning of Parigraha. And Aparigraha is the exact opposite. of non-possessions. So Aparigraha then means, just like hinsa means violence, and ahimsa is the opposite, which means non-violence. So Parigraha means to actually accumulate things, and Aparigraha would be the exact opposite. So non-possessiveness, non-grasping, let go of what is not needed. This is quite important because we all know that to sustain our life, we need certain items. We cannot do away with things. So then it becomes a question of priority amongst each one of us. What is more important? What is serving us? What is needed? And what is irrelevant for us? And that actually becomes something which is very personal. And it also means non-attachment. Now, Parigraha means essentially holding on to the negative feelings about people and situations. So it's very important that Parigraha essentially starts with people thinking the most connotation is about possessions, but it's also very important that it extends to thoughts and deeds and actions and kind of the emotions which we have. So holding on to negative feelings about people and situations that happened in the past. It's so common that people then talk about, oh, my mother-in-law said this, my father-in-law said this, my husband said this so many years ago, my wife, your business partner. There's so many things we hold on to which have happened so many years ago. And we just hold on to those ideas. We strive for a goal, but instead find that you're clinging on to a never-ending roller coaster. So look at the keywords here: holding on to things, clinging on to ideas. Being who you are, not because you have a fixed idea of who you should be. We are trying to pretend that, what will my name be in the society? And then resisting and feeling threatened by change. So again, the resisting. So that's Parigraha. We do not want to adapt to change because we know that change is universal. So in Yoga Sutra, it says Aparigraha is actually freedom, and possessions is actually bondage. And that's why our monks and nuns, one of the key things which they do is they renounce everything. So Lord Mahavir prescribed non-possession as one of the great vows. We know that there are 5 main cardinal principles of Jain ethics. Ahimsa, asteya means non-stealing, satya means truthfulness, aparigraha means non-possessiveness, and brahmacharya, chastity. So in the broadest sense possible, all that is other than self is possession if there is possessiveness for it. So this is a general definition of what Parigraha is. That after all, who am I, who you are, it's all to do with soul, who Atma Chu. Everything else is possessions. Now, Aparigraha does not mean that not to possess anything. If a Jain monk has clothes and a bowl and a blanket, it does not mean that he's Parigrahi, because the items which he possesses is required for them to lead a moral life. So Lord Buddha also said there are 4 requisites for a monk and rebuked to those who indulge in earning wealth and storing it. Now let's look at where does Parigraha fit in. When people talk about religion, religion has got 2 main branches: metaphysics and morality and ethics. So what's metaphysics? Metaphysics is the study of reality which cannot be seen. So where, for example, we say the Jain universe is in the shape of a Purush, Lok Purush. Or we can say we cannot karma. We cannot see the karma, but we believe in karma. Or we say there is Devlok Che or there is Narak Che. Who can prove these things? No one can prove it, but we believe that that's reality as expounded in the scriptures. So metaphysics is the study of things which do not have the relevance of day-to-day living. But it's kind of important. It's reality. Morality and ethics is to do with our day-to-day life. What is the code of conduct for monks and nuns? What is the code of conduct for us as laity? And those becomes the do's and don'ts that lead to a noble and spiritual life. Now let's look at possession. Possession is broken down into 2 facets: internal, which is bhav, and external, which is actual objects. Actually, as more commonly, it's the external phase which is most people think about. possession. When anyone says he's got a lot of possessions, people look at, he's got so many houses, he's got so much wealth, he's got so many items. So people always focus on the external aspects. However, this is actually ignored, internal possession. And therefore it says, mucha parigraho. What does mucha means? It says obsession, the internal desires. That is actually the real essence of possession. Now let's look at this. Now, externally, you could have very little items, or you could have a lot of items. And internally, you could be very satisfied soul, or you could have lots of desires, lots of obsession. And that gives you this grid of 4. So for example, internally, you have got no craving. You've got very little desires. And externally, you are a very poor person. But still, your internal desires does not mean that you want more and more. So that means you are a satisfied soul. Let's look at this aspect. Internally, you've got lots of desires. You have lots of wishes. You would really want lots of things. But externally, you don't have them. So what does that result in? Jealousy. Because you really want. You look at others and say, I don't have this. They've got so much more. And so because you've got that internal possessiveness, desire, obsession. Let's look at this bracket here. Internally, you've got lots of things, and externally, so internally you've got lots of obsession for things, and externally lots of items that results into greed. So, for example, there's always this: who is richer? Is it Bezos or is the CEO of Tesla going to be richer? And suppose one billionaire feels like a poor against another billionaire. So that results in more greed. In spite of having so much, you feel, oh, I really don't have that much. You want more and more and more. That results in greed. And the best aspect is this one here, vairagya. Internally, you've got very little craving, very little obsessiveness, desires for things. And externally, you've got lots of things. That means you are truly satisfied. You are really vairagya. You've got everything with you, but internally you don't have any attachment to the items that you have. And this is quite interesting here, that look at a classic example of Bharat Maharaja, who was the son of Lord Rishabdev. He was a Chakravarti. He conquered so much lands, 6 continents he conquered. Yet he had no attachment towards them. And eventually he took Diksha and he actually got Keval Gnan. It's also not a surprise that all our Tirthankars, 24 Tirthankars, they're actually born in royal families. And a year before they take Diksha, look at Varsidan Kareche, 1 year of total just giving away. So that just signifies that they've got no attachment. In spite of being born in royalty, they want to now renounce everything and then follow the path of Mankur. So that's kind of really the key essence. Now, when we, in the Swatambar Jains, when they do Pratikaman, Vanditu Sutra is a very important prayer. And literally in the 3rd verse, they say, Duviye Parigahami, Savajye Bahuve Arambe, Karavane Akarane, Parikame Desyam Sabvam. So what does this mean? That Parigraha is of 2 types, Duviye. So it's of 2 types, Parigraha. Abhyantar and Bahya. So Abhyantar means internal and Bahya means external. So these are the 2 forms of Parigraha. And we look at it further, that there are some transgressions which laity they perform. There are certain limits which are allowed for laity, Shavik and Shavikas. And what are the transgressions? So for example, Kshetra Vastu Pratikaman, exceeding the limits set for lands and houses. How many people do we know that I've got a portfolio of properties? I've got a property in this country here, I've got property overseas, I've got a holiday home there. So with all this wealth, people are exceeding the limits set for lands and houses. And what is this limits? This limit is internally. Everyone decides their own limits. That's the beauty of our Jain religion. It's not prescribed, only have 1 property, only have 2 properties. Every person decides for themselves what is the right amount. Hiranya, exceeding the limits set for gold and silver, exceeding the limits set for grain and other foodstuffs. In this current pandemic, we've seen how people, that instinct comes in of hoarding for items. When things are going to be less, then people want to, exceed the limits. exceeding the limits set for biped and quadruped animals. Obviously, this was written at the time of thousands of years ago, at the time of Lord Mahavir. If you extend that same principle now, it implies exceeding the limits for the vehicles which we have. And then if you are the super rich, oh, I've got this many yachts, I've got a private jet. So you're really exceeding the boundaries. And then exceeding the limits set for household chattels. So many items which you have in our house. So let's look at Parigraha. And in ancient times, how could you violate this the vow of Parigraha? Wrong measurements. When people used to come and get grains from you, because you have got that greed, I want to make more money, more wealth, you would actually give them less items and charge them more. Or for example, people saying you want to go and buy a cloth to stitch a sari or to stitch a shirt. So rather than giving, you said, I want 1 meter of this cloth, and the shopkeeper only gives you a smaller quantity. Adulteration. Many times you've heard, especially in India, that people say, people are selling milk, and he says, let me mix the water with milk. So you're just adulterating the items, because again, you actually want to have that instinct of more wealth. Overloading animals. So right now, again, it just means that we're using so much of transportation and just want more and more items. Destroying the livelihood of others. This is very important. When you look at Parigraha, and even if you look at this small child here, that he's got an ice cream. So this child is very happy at the expense of this child. So when one is happy, the other becomes sad. And this is also quite true if you look at our modern society. People invest in the stock market. And sometimes when the markets crash by 10% or more, then there's huge headlines, billions lost in the FTSE or in the New York Stock Exchange. But what does that actually mean? If people have actually some people have lost so much amount of money, someone else must have made money. It's a zero-sum game. You cannot just have someone just losing money. And on the other hand, when people make lots of wealth, then someone else must have sort of been exploited or lost that wealth. So it's a zero-sum game. It's almost like a normal distribution here. If one is going to gain, the other is going to lose. Or if this is going to lose, then there's someone else who is going to gain. And that's why in our scriptures it says, violence and possessions are two sides of the same coin. Where there is violence, there is possession, and where there is possession, there is violence. They're essentially, so ahimsa and aparigraha are essentially manifestations of all really the same thing. Now, let's look at these pictures here. We can see ingots of gold, a very fancy sports car, a palatial home, and sort of the latest iPhones here. Now, my question to you is, which two letters, if you add in front of these objects, will it change the entire perspective? So if you just wanted to use the chat function to see what items would you actually, what two words? So it's just one word, but with just two letters, which will actually change the entire perspective of what these items are. I can't actually find chat. Yes, my. So this actually changes the entire perspective, because when you use the word mine, can you imagine what's going to change? It's my gold. It's my car. This is my palatial house. This is my latest iPhone. With this, what's going to happen is I myself will start getting a little bit of ego and some pride. It's my wealth. And also, you, as my friends and people looking in the society, will have a different perception. Look at this person here. What amount of wealth he's got around. So a lot of things changes. So this items in itself, there's nothing wrong. But just by using the two letters my changes the entire perspective. That possessiveness comes in. Now, what fault is it for this small prince to be born into a royal family? Right since birth, this prince has got access to all this. So does it mean that he's possessive? No. It's only with the attachment of possessiveness Bill gets in, then only it becomes possession. Otherwise, they're just items. So it's no fault of this small prince to say, yes, I've been born into royalty. But that just becomes it's a way of life. It's only when the child grows up and starts feeling, yes, this is mine, I am a royalty, I'm going to be a king, this is my wealth. That's the time when this parigraha or possessiveness kicks in. Now, if you can see, it's actually a vicious cycle. The more possessions you have, the more desires you have. And desires, the more desires you have, it leads to greed, and that leads to sansar. And that's the reason why Parigraha becomes a central tenet of Jainism. It's a never-ending vicious cycle. Now, let's look at some beautiful words written by Srimad Rajchandra. He said, it has been said again and again that wealth cannot give happiness and peace to man. One who amasses wealth with a view of achieving peace in life makes a terrible mistake. In fact, the more he amasses wealth, the more he is fatted. At long last, wealth does not come to his help, and he goes away from this world, leaving all this vast wealth behind. Keeping this fact in mind, all the objects of the world are transitory and they cannot give real happiness, and that one will leave this world without being accompanied by one's wife or husband, children, or by relatives, let alone by wealth. They should never develop any attachment for them. Man's desires are infinite, so infinite that they can never be satiated, even if the world's wealth, including gold and silver, is placed at the disposal. So he's saying that if it rains gold and silver, varsad pade che, to pan humans' desire for that will not be satisfied. If wealth, so just 1 second. So if wealth, fame, sensual pleasures, and possessions become the driving goals of our lives, then the evils of jealousy, deceit, quarrel shall definitely overcome us. And there'll be no room left for the ultimate quest for the truth in our lives. So these are kind of the wise words of Srimad Rajchandra. Now, as I've said earlier, when we look at Parigraha, Parigraha is generally thought of goods and objects, but it also means on thought. It also implies thoughts, prejudices, and status. And Aparigraha is the opposite, just letting go of not even items, but even thoughts. Now, here it's actually quite important to bear in mind. What's important is let go of what is not needed. So, for example, if someone has got the thought, Sharir ne atma juda che, my body and my soul are separate. It's a thought. But that thought, time and again, repeated thoughts, is actually quite beneficial for our spiritual growth. So those thoughts are actually quite useful. So that I shouldn't let go of such thoughts. But there could be thoughts of, oh, it's been a lockdown. It's been almost a year since I haven't been to a shopping mall. I'm really craving to go on a shopping mall. Now that thought in itself is really not necessary. So let go of such thoughts. It's not serving us. So again, discrimination kicks in here. Let's look at another beautiful quote by Saint John of the Cross. He was a Spanish mystic almost about 500 years ago. And what does he say? The soul that is attached to anything, however much good there may be in it, will not arrive at the liberty of divine union. For whether it be a strong wire rope or a slender and delicate thread that holds a bird, it matters not. If it really holds it fast, for until the cord be broken, the bird cannot fly. So there's a bird, whether it's going to be a thick rope or a very slender thread. If the bird is holding on to it, it doesn't matter. It's not able to fly. Doesn't matter how much you have, even if whether it's a very thick rope or something very slender. The fact that you got sort of bondage to it, you cannot fly. Let's look at it from our kind of Jain perspective. Any one of these imperfections, we have got so many, we've got sort of 18 imperfections. If the soul has become attached and habituated to it, it is of great harm to its growth and progress in virtue, as though it were to fall daily into many other imperfections and casual venial sins. So one kind of imperfection leads to another imperfection, and this just goes on and on. For as long as it has this, there is no possibility that it will make progress in perfection, even though the imperfection may be extremely slight. And that's the reason why when our monks and nuns, they have the Mahavrats, They really do not even want to have any exceptions to it. They want to follow the rules as they are, very strictly. Now, let's look at this. We are staying in a society where when passion meets inspiration, an obsession is born. And what's cure for an obsession? Get another one. I desire very little, but the things I do consume me. And that is the essence of retail therapy. Can you actually believe that people are actually using the word retail therapy? It's a therapy, like a medical therapy. So if people feel, oh, I'm feeling very depressed, I'm feeling very low, I really want to go and spend money. And that becomes, they feel good. The fact that you go out, you're spending money, you're getting more items, that has become a therapy. What an irony of the today's day and age. And this is actually helping people who are falling under this trap, saying it's helping emotionally, my behavior is changing, and it's motivating me in life. And what's become the today's society? I don't judge people by the color of their skin, I judge them by the handbag and the shoes. This is the reality of what we live in today. And this is the retail therapy. I mean, in the Western world and even the Eastern world is following suit. And Acharya Umaswati says, Parigraha is equal to attachment or infatuation for possession. It's not the items, it's that internal feeling, the desires. Now let's look at the opposite, Aparigraha. Desires have no reins. It's like the wild horse. To restrain your desire, learn to hold your reins. And what does Mahatma Gandhi say? There's enough on this planet for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. So don't buy stuff you don't need. That becomes the external form of Aparigraha. And who is a hero? He who conquers his urges. And that becomes the internal form of Aparigraha. So if we really want to get to Aparigraha, we need to look at both aspects. Let us minimize our external items and also reduce the internal craving, the obsession for things. Now, let's look at kind of from a Jain perspective. We are all Shavak and Shavikas, and we are incompetent to follow the Mahavrats, the major vows, which are followed by our monks and nuns. So we follow the vows partially. And the code of conduct for lay people is different. So for monks, it's the Mahavrats, and for the laity, which is us, Shavak and Shavikas, it's the Anuvrats, the minor or partial vows. So it's the same vows as the monks and nuns, but with some exceptions. And these are actually broken down into 3 different categories, the Anuvrats. So there are again 5 Anuvrats, small vows, 3 Gunavrats, strengthening vows, and 4 Shikshavrats, disciplinary vows. Even in the spiritual world, we need strengthening and disciplinary vows. So in the physical world, we need to build ourselves. So people go to the gym, people do exercises. So you need to sort of strengthen your body. And at the same time, for the discipline, there are so many YouTube videos available, yet people need to go and spend money to get a personal trainer. So I need a personal trainer who's going to discipline so that I can build my body and be healthy. So we actually need an external entity to discipline us. Same with the spiritual world. So who is a Shravak or a Shavika? So the root of the word is Shrin, to hear. So it implies one who sincerely and regularly listens to the teachings and the preachings of Jineshwar Bhagwan is a Shravak. Another word is Shraman Upasak, the one who adores the Jina, his teachings and the ascetics of his order. And another meaning of Shavak and Shavika is Desh Sanyami, one who is partially self-restrained and minimizes attachments. Partially, not totally, but partially. So what is a Vrat? Wow. This is integral to our Jain philosophy. So how many times, in the morning when people join Shamnijis for meditation or for Pratikamana or any events when you're going to listen to the Shamnijis, at the end, they always give us small vrats, small vows. For today, minimize 1 item. Or their vows for penances. So Tyag is central and integral part of Jain philosophy. It becomes a rules of conduct voluntarily and resolutely undertaken for observance. Very important, voluntarily. There is no compulsion. Even when we want to do tap, oh, pollution has come, I can't do upwas. If you can't do upwas, do ekasno. If you can't do ekasno, do beasno. If you can't do beasno, then why don't you do in the morning? You can say, I have now taken a pachkan for porsi, sat porsi. So you can just choose what you want to do. It imposes a boundary on us. And samyaktva or right faith is essential. This is very important. Why are you doing this? So you need to have the right faith. So, and then we can see that, pachkans are, even when you do pratikaman, pachkans are there all the time. Some people take pachkans lifelong. Some people say, I've taken a lifelong vow of not eating underground root vegetables. It could be for 1 year, could be for a week, or even for a day. Even you could do pachkan for an hour. I remember when I was a child, there used to be a great book. And you could say that I'm going to school, I'm going to tick 1 hour of no. So you recite 3 nokars and say that I'm now not going to be eating or drinking anything for 1 hour. That's just 1 tick. So if 3 hours have passed by, you do 3 ticks. And then you can say, okay, now it's my break time. I need to eat a snack. You would say 3 nokars, eat something, and then again say 3 nokars until lunchtime, another 2 hours. In that way, you're just taking small vows even for 1 hour. So when you looked at, so there are 5 anuvrats. We know that ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. So aparigraha is a smaller, minor vow for the laity, that we need to minimize our attachment and infatuation to external and internal items. So that's aparigraha for us. Now let's look at the next category, gunavrats, strengthening vows. There are 3 gunavrats, digvrat, bhog, upabhog, pariman vrat, and anarthadand viraman vrat. This one is related to aparigraha. Limit the use of items, bhog and upabhog. There are 2 words here, bhog and upabhog. Bhog and upabhog means items which you use repeatedly and some items which only use one-time use. So for example, clothes is something we use every day. So it's one item of piece of cloth, but I'm using it every day. Whereas food, I've eaten once, I need another food. If I had 1 banana today, that 1 banana is not satisfying me tomorrow. I need another one here. So that's a repeated item use. So bhog, upabhog, limit the use of items used once or frequently. So that really brings in the concept of reuse, recycle, and reduce. Which all the governments and all the society is saying we now need to really reduce our carbon impact footprint and the amount of items which we're using. Now let's look at Siksha Vrats. So there are 4 disciplinary vows: Samayak Vrat, Desh Vaikasik, Poshad Upwas, and Atithi Samvibhag. Now, Desh Vaikashik, limiting the sphere of one's activity still further. What it says is set a boundary of, you could actually limit your saying like, I will not travel beyond 20 miles today or 30 miles today. So that's one form of Desh Vaikasik. So you're really limiting the sphere of your activity. Today, I will only do this many items. I will not do some many other items. So you are really, depending on your capability, you are limiting the sphere of your activity further and further and for within longer limits. Another aspect of Aparigraha is Atithi Samvibhag. It's beautiful here, Atithi. What does this Atithi mean? Tithi, as you might know, that's our Indian calendar. When people say Aaj 14 hai, Aaj 8 hai, Ekam Poonam hai, so that becomes Tithi. It's the lunar calendar, the day of the lunar calendar. So Atithi means that someone which does not follow this Tithi, Beach Pachamatam, and which implies that someone who comes without looking at any time or day or specific time, someone who just comes unannounced. So that's Atithi. So what does that mean? A guest. A guest can come in at any time. They will not say, oh, today is Pacham and let me go someone. So guests, the doors are open, they come in any time. So this word actually means in the scriptural point of view that our monks and nuns, they come in at any time. They'll knock on our door and they'll come for gochri. And so they are welcome at any time and we need to serve them. But you extend that further to us, as laity, that any guest comes in, and even let's extend this feeling even further. People who are starving, people who do not have, let's do some charity, let's do some donation. Many times in the COVID-19, many of the institutions were distributing food parcels for people who have been affected. So this is all in the spirit of Atithi Samvibhag. Now let's look at a small story of Punya Shavik, We'll not read the entire story, but let's just look. Who was Punya Shravak? He was a devotee. Just one second. So he was a devotee whose devotion was praised by Bhagwan Mahavir himself. He was a resident of Rajgrihi, and he came under the spell of Mahavir's discourse and began to practice Aparigraha, abandonment of worldly possessions. He embraced poverty willingly. Can you imagine that he gave away all his wealth he had inherited from his father? It's an amazing thought. That can you imagine that if I inherit all this wealth and then you just give it away willingly? And he embraced poverty willingly. He believed that contentment had nothing to do with possessions, with wealth or acquisitiveness. It is simply a state of mind. And once he could not worship, he could not do his samayak with his usual concentration, and he was disturbed. He asked his wife to find out the reason. She started thinking. After a long thought, she says, as I was coming home, I got a few cakes of cow dung, and since they belonged to no one, I brought them home. And I used it for cooking. Punya Shavak said, you did not do the right thing. If no one had claimed those cakes, they must belong to the state. Go and deposit them back where you found them. And because she cooked food on the cow dung which was not theirs, his mind was restless. It was then his conscience stopped pricking him. A slight aberration and he would be disturbed. So this is the extent of how our noble Shavaks have been in the past. There's another beautiful historical story. I recall a beautiful anecdote of Emperor Alexander when he came to conquer India. He had an encounter with a Jain Muni. He was puzzled to see that a Jain Muni attracted large and admiring audience wherever he went, while people feared Alexander. So he asked the Jain Muni, what is it that you have which I do not? I thought I had plenty, wealth, power, luxuries, and armies. And the Jain Muni replied, I never take anything. I have given up everything. This is what I teach my followers. Learn to give more and more and take less and less. You, as an emperor, have always taken from people, but have given them nothing. You always loot and take away. And 3 years ago, there was actually a beautiful song sang by Sagar Malde on the life of Alexander the Great, of Sikandar. And eventually it says that Sikandar actually said that when he told his comrades that when I die, bury me with my hands sticking out of the grave, to show that here I was an emperor, but when I have died, I've taken nothing away with me. And that's sort of an important, and it's a very beautiful song. If you went into Google and you type this, it's a beautiful song sung just to show on what even Alexander the Great felt at the time of his death. Now, Acharya Samantabhadra defines Aparigraha as a vow to putting limits to the measure of one's worldly possessions, animate or inanimate things. Both. Desires multiply with fulfillment. Let's look at a very recent example, Donald Trump. He's a billionaire even before he became president. So what motivated him? He wanted to become the president, power. So after money, he really wanted the power. Fair enough, he had one term, and now what does he want? He actually wants to go for a second term. And perhaps even if he had his choice, a third term. Desires multiply with fulfillment. One thing was fulfilled, he became a billionaire. So that was fulfilled. Now what? Next is power. I had power for one term, I will need more power. So it just keeps on increasing and increasing. Desires just keep on multiplying. And as you can see, the wealth keeps on increasing. When we have this much money, we are striving for this. After we get this, we want to strive for this much, and just more and more. Aparigraha Mahavrat. I'll just focus on items which are sort of in red. What does it Aparigraha mean? It's a detachment of oneself, root and branch from internal and external attachments. It's Mamatva Visarjanam Aparigraha. And it also says that karma is inevitable in the presence of parigraha. So the more parigraha we have, karma is going to come in. We saw that cycle, that more parigraha, more violence, more karma. Considering from the highest perspective, parigraha includes even the slightest attachment to the body. This is a very important concept, and really goes into the concept of sanlekhana, which is known as the holy death in the Jains. There's been a lot of controversy. A lot of people think that it's like suicide, but people, monks and nuns, and even the Shavik and Shravikas who follow this, can you imagine the state that here they are thinking that now I've got no attachment to my body. This body has served me very well throughout my life. I've done everything spiritually, and now the time has come for me to leave. And I'm now even leaving the attachment to my body. And that's really the highest form of, you can say, that, we have talked about all these internal and external possessions, but even the attachment to the body at certain stage goes away. So the possessions of Aparigraha, the doctrine of non-possession as enunciated by Bhagavan Mahavir, is all pervasive, eternal, and the whole truth. This is very important. Say, for example, when we have taxation in this country here, you say, oh yeah, there's a 40% tax here. So that rule is not true in Dubai. So in United Arab Emirates, there could be zero tax. Or if you went in another country, the tax level could be different. So there are rules which could be different in different localities. But when you look at Aparigraha, and this is a concept, a philosophy, it's all pervasive, eternal, and the whole truth. That's why even Aparaje Dev Devi Oche, who have got so much possessions around them, the fact that they're born in heaven, that in itself means that they cannot take vows because they've got just so much possessions. And that's why it says a human form is even more important than the being born as a Dev and Devi, because they cannot willingly renounce it. You've got all the possessions in front of you, you're just there and you just cannot renounce. We are the only species who have got a mind, can say, yes, I've got it, but I do not want that possessions, the instinct of obsession for it. So this concept by Bhagavan Mahavir is eternal across all time periods and the whole truth. Therefore, in Acharam Sutra, it is said, keep the possessions away from you. Possessions destroy peace and equanimity and create turbulence and animosity. It makes the life full of uneasiness, discontent, and dull. Possessions makes one's heart greedy, intellectually consumption-oriented, mind of wandering nature, and lose sensual controls. And it's quite a starking fact that 1% of the world's population owns 44% of the wealth. Isn't that amazing? That the people who become richer and richer are owning more and more of this wealth. It's quite interesting here. At the time of Bhagavan Parshvanath, there were only 4 vows. When you talk of the Mahavrats, Aparigraha was not there. And celibacy, brahmacharya, and non-possession were together. So ever since the second Tirthankar till the 23rd Tirthankar, it was kind of only 4 paths. And it's only the time of Lord Rishabdev and Bhagavan Mahavir that this 5th vow came in, because at that time they thought possession is now becoming an integral part going in our time cycle, and this became a 5th vow, an independent vow by itself. Let's look at the scriptural basis for Parigraha. The real meaning of Parigraha is not external possession, but is internal infatuation and obsession. To acquire anything in its entirety with a feeling of attachment, or its mind with a sense of infatuation, is Parigraha. Daisvekalik Sutra, infatuation. Tattvartha Sutra, again, infatuation. I am its owner, or it belongs to me, and such feelings resulting from attachment is Parigraha. Jain Siddhant Deepika says attachment and ego are also Parigraha. Can you imagine? Even ego becomes part of Parigraha. Therefore, all things associated with feelings of mind or infatuation is Parigraha. A very kind of casual example. You got someone's coming to serve you some tea, and someone did not say thank you, shukriya, and so that feeling, I did so much money, that in a way is Parigraha. It's very subtle. In the second section of Bhagavati, it says, Bhagavan Mahavir says, Gautam, desire, infatuation, craving, and passions are all concomitant. Wherever there is possessions, there is anger, pride, deceit, and greed. Can you imagine? Possession, with possessions comes the 4 kashais. They are all together. It's like our car. When we drive, one wheel does not rotate. All the 4 wheels rotate together. You can't say just have one tire moving and all the other 3 tires static. If one goes, and all the other 4 goes. Where there is possessions, there is anger, pride, deceit, and greed also. Parigraha is the fountain of all sins. All sins originate from Parigraha. In the Buddhist philosophy, what is Parigraha called? They call it Trishna, excessive or intense desire, Trishna. So even because Buddhism is also a shamanic religion, so many of the concepts are very similar, and so this is also there in the Buddhist philosophy, Trishna. The importance of Aparigraha. So let's look at the practical outlook. The importance of the principle of Aparigraha is very great, both in life of an individual and in the life of a nation. If individuals and nations follow the principle of Aparigraha and live to its ideal, the world will be a veritable paradise, and there will not be that much hatred, jealousy, ill will, and suffering. The attitude to possess material goods and other means of comfort is what pollutes one's life. The attitude. What is important in life is not to increase one's desire, but to reduce it to the minimum. Desire fulfilled begets further desires, and there's no end to them. Look at capitalism. What does capitalism say? That doesn't make people work too much or accumulate more material possessions than they need. People make those decisions and the systems delivers. So it's us. There's all these items around here. So capitalism does not mean that I need all of them. It's those decisions have to be made by the people. But and what does capitalism, kind of the definition? Private property, individuals are encouraged to own not only private possessions, but the most important, money, are encouraged to own capitalism. And unlimited personal profit, that becomes a byproduct. Unlimited, there's no limits. So to the amount of the profits we need, we are staying in a society when the stock markets and everything are based on unlimited profit. In this slide here, it's kind of amazing to see that Lord Mahavir, this is Professor Bhattacharya's article, says, Lord Mahavir, keeping nothing for himself, reduced his necessities to their barest minimum. In the words of Thomas Carlyle, he made his claims of wages a zero. It is true that people of this materialistic age would not be able to practice renunciation to the extent and manner done by Lord Mahavir. But unquestionably, he is the transcendent ideal to be followed. So he's the ideal. Bhagwan Mahavir is an ideal we need to follow as much faithfully and closely as possible. We cannot renounce like Bhagwan Mahavir. I mean, the closest to Lord Mahavir is the Digambar monks who do not even have clothes. Some amount of renunciation of Aparigraha, as it is called in Jain ethics, should be fundamental principle of all socialist philosophy, and the motto of the socialist should be live and let live, like that of Lord Mahavir. Economists tell us that today that Americans own and consume twice as much as we did in 1950. Are we twice as happy? And what does the word consume mean? Look at the definition of consume: to destroy by separating into parts which cannot be reunited. So destroying into parts which cannot be reunited is by burning or eating. And it comes from the Latin word consumere, to use up, to eat, to waste. So consume essentially comes from Latin, which essentially means to use up, to eat, and to waste. So consumerism leads to consumption, and we are exhausting the Earth's resources, we are wasting them, and we're totally destroying the Mother Earth. The other word is use, to put to some purpose. So in Jain, there are actually two words which comes in, upabhog and upayog. Upabhog means consumptions, which is this. Upabhog. Upayog means utility. So I need to eat, so why use a single-use plastic? Why can't I use reusable items? So this is now, the Western countries are taking these concepts, but if you look at our kind of the Indian tradition, this concept of reuse, recycle has been there in society for many, many years. Let's look at a cartoon. This is a cartoon which says Helga. Helga is actually going on war, and he says, look, I've gone on war and I've brought the loot of the entire world. Oh, good, you got my dining room furniture at last. And the members of the family are saying, yes, it has come quite dearly with all the bitter battles I fought all over the world. But now Helga's little cottage is completely furnished. Now the house is packed from top to bottom. That is why he's so cheerful. There can be nothing more Helga can ask for. I want a bigger house. So can you see, after getting all the loots of the world, one would think that they're so satisfied. And now this comic so beautifully illustrates this concept of Parigraha, want more and more and more. Look at even some of the other faiths. Look at the Muslim faith, zakat. You may lose some tangible wealth when you give zakat, but the spiritual benefit you gain from it is priceless. Look at the modern economist, Adam Smith. What did he say? All for ourselves and nothing for other people seems in every age of the world to have been the wild maxim of masters of mankind. These are the kind of the fathers of the modern economics. And they are arguing that free, unregulated economic competition would maximize profits. Unregulated, no regulation. And you want to have competition to maximize profits, boost quality and innovation, create division of labor, and make prices reasonable. So he referred to competition as an invisible hand, which kept the economy stable and orderly without the need for any external designers. So here are people who are saying that the economy does not need any boundaries. When our philosophy says we need vows, we need boundaries around us, the modern economics says we don't need any of these things. Maximize profits to however much you want. There is no boundary. What is good for us got translated into goods. Let's look at modern times. Adam Smith, in his book Wealth of Nations, says it's a self-interest for self-promotion. Look after me. It's my interest, my promotion. I really want to make wealth at the cost of others. I don't care about others. It's all about me. And this is economic philosophy which lacks human values. I desire pleasure, so therefore I ought to desire pleasure. Look at the ancient times. In ancient times, there was actually a Charvak philosophy which used to say, "Khai pine maja karo," eat, drink, and be merry. Who knows whether there is heaven or hell? Enjoy the pleasures of the world right now. Do whatever you want. Have no barriers. But this philosophy did not prevail. And this was actually a very minor philosophy at the time of the Shamanic philosophy, at the time of Buddhist or the Jain philosophy at that stage. And that philosophy says that we need to stay within our boundaries of self-control and holding the goal of moksha. So we need to have some boundaries. Look at the global energy consumption. Look at since 1800 to 2020. This is called an exponential growth. Look at the oil consumption. This is about 2009. America, how much do they use? The big bubble here, followed by China. Look at the world oil consumption. This is how many millions of barrels per day. And this is in 2019. And this is 20 million barrels. America is number one. Number two would be China, and number three, and look at the gap. 20 million barrels of oil, which is used by USA, followed by China 13 and India 5. Just look at the amount of what they're using. It's just purely driven by consumption. Again, there used to be another John Maynard Keynes. He's again another leading authority on economics. He's the one who actually founded the International Monetary Fund, IMF. And he was an alumni of Eton College and Cambridge University. Capitalism is the astounding belief that the most wickedest man will do the most wickedest of things for the greatest good of everyone. Can you imagine? What he's saying is that you can have the most wicked people and pretending to do the most common good for everyone. In my view, that everyone is not everyone, but it's oneself. People want to do wicked things, will do anything just for their own benefit. Another important pitfall of the economics of affluence is the persistence of inflation. This is very interesting, which shows that inflation had earlier been an outcome of wars, civil disorders, famines, and natural disasters. So hundreds of years ago, inflation would occur that there's been a major war, there's been a famine, things are not available here. So if you look at supply and demand, people want items, they want food, they want things, but the supply is not there. So the price will keep on going up and up. Look at it in recent times. Inflation is persisting during periods of peace and rising prosperity. Why should there be inflation when we are actually living in peace and rising prosperity? Everyone deplores the failure of effective against because inflation is not good. All these central bank governors and they all want to contain inflation. They do not want it. They said we want, like in the UK, they would like to have a targeted inflation of 2%, which they feel that that's just about right. But if the inflation became very high, then that's not very good. But no one suggests a remedy. Everyone agrees on the importance of stable prices, but no specific action or serious suggestion makes it a remedy to this evil. So this is another byproduct of consumerism, just inflation. Choice is fundamental to human nature, and that's why we're saying that Parigraha means we need to focus on this choice of ours. This is again very beautiful. Mr. N.P. Jain, who was a former Indian ambassador to the United Nations, he's written this very beautifully. Violence grows from acquisitiveness. Jainism does not subscribe to forced poverty. We are not forcing ourselves to poverty, but suggests that wants should be minimized voluntarily and there should be no grabbing at any level. Many economic systems today are based only on promoting wants rather than curbing them. This is having disastrous results. One of them is that we are exhausting the non-replenishable resources of this world. Another is that material goods and money are becoming the measures of man. Internationally, the spirit is leading to regional and world conflicts. And what does he say? What's the solution? The 3 A's, ahimsa, aparigraha, and anekantvad, constitute the basic core concepts of Jain philosophy. Out of these basic tenets comes amity, compassion, equanimity, and appreciation. So this is really the solution. The greater the wealth, the thicker will be the dirt. Wastage is economically, ethically, and environmentally wrong. Environmental degradation is a huge concern. It's so much, the greater the wealth, the thicker will be the dirt. And that's the reason why you now have people asking, where have you got the wealth from? The source of income. How can it be possible that someone has amassed so much amount of wealth? Well, there could be someone very lucky. Someone has done a great invention. Someone could have, and they have legitimately made lots of money. But when you look at all around us and people making so much wealth, then there has to be, the more wealth you do, it's not straight. So now let's look at the last few minutes of what are the things we should do to combat this. Education is important. State policies could be implemented to combat this. Spirituality is very integral. We need to change the attitude. And that's why sanskars are very important. The sanskars which are embedded into our children from a very young age. And the concept of charity. That possession of your hands are open up. Yes, and that attitude will change. So it's again, we do not want, it's just Aparigraha is going on reduce, reuse, and recycle. Again, it's in consonance with what we are experiencing in our society right now. Aparigraha is realistic, practical, and rational principle, because many people can say many of these principles are we can't follow them, but it's a realistic, practical, and rational principle with a solid foundation in the social system. It can be practiced. And one has to realize that the source of happiness and peace lies in human individuals, not outside him. External possessions are only meant to be used and not to be owned. The ownership of everything of this world lies with nature. What a beautiful concept. Ownership of everything of this world lies with nature. My house, my car, it's with nature, the ownership. It's not with me. The human individual has tremendous energies and potentialities which are not based on external possessions. This is really the key. So he says, give, but without expectations. And that's what we really need to foster. Accumulate with 2 hands, with 1,000 hands. When we live for ourselves, no calculation arises, but for others, calculation kicks in. Do something in small steps. This is really the key thing, because sometimes we feel there's so much poverty, there's so much things outside. What can I do? I can't change the world, but we can do some small steps. The essence is bhav, thoughts and feelings of universal welfare. So that really concludes my talk today. As I said, my talk was based on some of the books I found, Aparigraha, and sort of searching through the internet. So Jai Jinendra, everyone. I don't know if anyone has got any questions. Let me.
Rajiv, I had a question. I don't know.
Sure.
This is Bansi, yeah?
Yes.
Rajiv, the suggestion from your talk is that a socialist system is what Jainism is promoting, the Aparigraha principle is promoting. And I guess the question in my mind is, which socialist system do you know of that has been successful in the world as of now?
Okay, that's very great. So when you talk of socialism generally has been connoted to, so for example, Marxism, or people talk of socialist states, so like a Marxist state. And essentially what happens is that you've got possessions. So when you have got a state which interferes with possessions, what that means is that they say that you cannot possess all the wealth, it should be freely distributed amongst all the population here. And that control, if the state takes control over, then that does not function. So there cannot be a socialist system which is imposed by a state. If that becomes a natural byproduct, or natural outcome, then there is kind of consonance between everyone. So I cannot think of any socialist system which is implemented in any part of the world which you can say this is ideal. So capitalism, in one way, we know that it's got flaws, and socialism, again, we know that it's also got it cannot be practiced freely. So if that became part and parcel of the society, for example, if the people who have got the haves and the have-nots, if the people who have got the haves said, yes, I have been blessed, I've been lucky that with my punya, I've got so much wealth around me, let me distribute it freely. And if that becomes like a kind of a consciousness prevalent, then that system becomes a natural byproduct. But you cannot enforce this thing. So the socialistic idea cannot be, so I've got more than enough. Why don't I share with others? And let me educate someone, let me feed someone. And if this becomes a global phenomenon, then that becomes a panacea.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but I say, but when we stay in societies right now, Bansi, I think we cannot say that this is ideal, that we can only do a comparative studies. But I think by and large, we cannot say that, the utopian, that we know that the essence of Jainism says everyone's karma is different. So you cannot ever have someone that everyone's having everything in all equality. So that's not reality. But it's an attitude which can change, and with that attitude, we can make society a much better place. And it's really what he says, that the whole gist of this talk was that if this concept became, sort of, if the entire society adopted this view, then the world will become a better place.
Doesn't it need a higher level of human consciousness to be able to do all those things? Because at the moment, I don't think the humans are capable of doing that.
That's exactly the key point. It requires a high level of human consciousness, and this human consciousness is not related to Jainism, to Hinduism, to Buddhism, to Muslim. This is a universal consciousness, and if this becomes prevalent, that's essentially what is required. That's essentially true, because here what we are talking about is nothing to do with. Yes, we have now put our Jain philosophy, the Bhagwan Mahavir said, but as you can see, that Muslim faith have got the same concept. If you look at the Christian faith, Buddhist faith, Krishna, every faith has got the same idea. So it is indeed the universal consciousness which is required.
Thank you.
Yep. Anyone else? Okay, so Jai Janitha, thank you very much. Just to mention that respected Shamitis have been busy for the past 3 weeks with some conferences. So that's why we had this series of talks at JDB. Next week will be another very interesting Sunday session. It's a very unique one. It's going to be done by Jatin Shah, and we are going to be showing spiritual art meditation. So there'll be no talking. Jatin Bhai uses, he's a graphic designer, and he's done a lot of imaginative diagrams and pictures using spirituality. And so it's going to be a 1 hour session with 40 minutes of pure meditation on the art which is created, with about 10 or 15 minutes of question and answer session. So it's a truly genuine, almost like a meditative contemplation experience. No talking, just pictures and some very soft divine music, and just sort of immerse yourself in that art. So please do join in next week. Jai Jindra, Om Aram. Thank you.